So this is podcast number 5 of the Women in Talent and Success Stories as to how they got there with Maha. So thank you for joining. I just want to run over brief introductions of us both so people know who we are, what we do, a little bit about yourself, how you got to where you are. It'd be also great to know if there's any female influences in your life which has kind of guided you to where you are today, to the leadership role that you're in. What made you move into cryptocurrency? What part of blockchain excites you? What you also feel more challenged about, where you may have felt some challenges in hiring across diversity, and then what we can do as female leaders in order to influence people to join the industry and also to develop internally. So I'll just quickly kickstart us. So I work for Interquest. They're a global search and consultancy business where I lead on their European footprint based in Amsterdam, focusing on risk, regulation and compliance related.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me, Anna. It's such a privilege to be here today. I'm Maha Al-Saadi. I am currently working in the capacity of a Director of Compliance and Regulatory Affairs for Bankhaus Scheich Wertpapierspezialist AG, where I'm responsible for ensuring compliance with digital assets related policies and procedures and ensuring that we have an open dialogue with our regulators.
So from where you started, because obviously you used to do regulatory applications in Qatar. So from moving from there to Germany, how would you say you've kind of made your way to where you are today? And what are the differences between the two countries in terms of regulatory application to blockchain?
Sure. So I'll just start out with my whole career pathway until today. I graduated from Qatar University. I was a bit of a nerd, first of my class. With banking and financial studies and a minor in accounting. And at that time, my father wanted me to take over his business. My dad had a contracting company. And I was like, no, I don't really know anything about contracting. And I know it's like your family business, but I don't see myself fit in there. And then I started looking for opportunities and I ended up at Qatar Financial Center Regulatory Authority. What drew me to QFCRA was the fact that it was really multinational in a very small country. QFCRA ensured that they'll get regulatory talent from across the globe. So we had people from the FCA, from the UK, from APRA, from Australia, from the US, and they started basically bringing best practice within QFCRA to attract financial services institutions to Doha. And I was working in the authorization department for around 4 years, where I was helping financial institutions to get that license and help assess the fitness and propriety of the management functions that will be carrying out these tasks. So that was my first interaction with regulation, like applying law in practice and seeing if the financial institutions are able to be granted a license. Yeah. During that time, I came across a German guy that convinced me to move with him to Germany. We are now married, and
congratulations!
Thank you. I moved to Germany in 2011, and that was the first like cultural / reality shock / wake up call, because in Germany nobody knew who the Al-Saadis are, what my dad did, because like family names and connections in the Middle East are pretty huge. And here I really had to prove myself from day one. I did not speak a word in German, so finding a job in a traditional bank was close to impossible. So I decided to apply for an LLM in finance law at Qatar University, and the program was in English. And while studying, I was also working part-time as an anti-money laundering consultant for a small boutique firm. And once I graduated, I ended up in Deutsche Börse, the German stock exchange. There I was in the markets data team. That was my first touch point. And it's really, really a dry topic. So you'll be looking into reference data, ISINs, and it was a complete new world to me. And it came with the implementation of EMIR and MiFID II. So I looked into EMIR from a regulatory reporting point of view, and within MiFID, I was the liaison manager for all EU 27 countries to ensure that we're implementing the rules and regulations properly. And here it comes. Where did my interaction with blockchain come along, I applied for a program within Deutsche Börse, which is called the Evolving Leadership Program. They would select a number of participants from Deutsche Börse Group, go through an assessment center, etc., and only a handful of employees will be selected. And I made the cut. And as part of that program, you have the opportunity to have a job rotation within one of Deutsche Börse's group entities or across the globe. And I chose to go for the FinTech Hub. And the FinTech Hub is Deutsche Börse's arm that would help startups to formulate their business plans, hopefully to reach a stage where they'll be ripe for an IPO. And I was fascinated with how advanced fintechs are looking into things from a technological perspective, but they always underestimate the regulatory burden from authorization, compliance, talking to the regulators. Funny enough, my first interaction was with AI, then blockchain, a flip from what we're seeing right now. And at the end of the 6 months job rotation, I was approached by the managing director of that FinTech Hub and was informed that Deutsche Börse is looking to establish a specific department, the new digital markets team, that would look into the use of technologies, specifically blockchain, to upgrade the financial market infrastructure. And that was like 2018, 2019. We had zero regulatory clarity. And it was at the back of all of the shenanigans around, I don't know, blockchain confused with cryptocurrencies, with Bitcoin, with money laundering. So it was a very interesting time to join. And my task was to work with our colleagues from Group Regulatory Strategy to formulate a grassrooting exercise, talking to our regulators that we need regulatory clarity because we see the potential of blockchain. And that resulted in intense discussions with the European Commission, the Parliament, ESMA, but also on a local level with BaFin and the Ministry of Finance. And in Germany, that resulted in the E-Securities Act, where we are seeing dematerialization of securities, getting rid of that paper deed and having electronic registers. And in Europe, it was a digital finance package to which the infamous Mika belongs to. And after a while, I felt like I've seen it all, I've done it all. And this is the first time I'm saying it, a personal thing happened. It's like I suddenly lost my mom for COVID, and it was a wake-up call that life is too short. And if you, and I decided like I was living way too long in my comfort zone. Deutsche Börse is an excellent employer. Work-life balance is amazing, but I wanted more. I wanted to see if I could get more out of life. Am I able to influence any change? And that was the time when I was approached by Trade Republic, the German neo broker that is one of the biggest fintechs in Europe, to explore a position as a crypto compliance officer. And I loved the hype, the technology, how engaged all of the employees are, really thinking about the fact that we want to close that pension gap. But it felt a bit too scary for me because it had the retail aspect that I was not dealing with before. Now it's real people's money that they can lose. And I really could not sleep at night sometimes thinking about what happened with, I don't know, Celsius going bankrupt. Did any of our clients lose money? It was not as easy as I thought. So then I was approached by Bankhaus Scheich, and their focus is institutions. It's based in Frankfurt, so I would not be traveling a lot and leaving my kids behind. I have 3 kids, by the way. And I was like, okay, institutions, they have a very specific market, which is market making and liquidity provision. I did not learn that before. And plus the cherry on the top is that they work with the state of Hessen to whitelist tainted coins and put them back into circulation in a safe way. And that's where I have been for the last couple of months.
See, it is correct what you say with fintechs. They want to add, or banks, they want to add the digital side of it, whether it's artificial intelligence or blockchain. But then it is a regulatory burden, which they then slap on their backs, which they never really realise until you have the regulator knocking at the door, asking all of these questions about AML, how fraud and analytics are put together, how the regulator is meant to regulate the affairs that you're looking to move forwards with. And the difference between retail and institutions are what they are on the tin. It could be like a JP Morgan applying for an asset license or looking to use a blockchain sphere. Or it could be me sat in my front room like this and you're the one managing my money, which could all disappear in the space of a second. Do you speak, just touching across that, do you speak German now?
I speak a bit of German now. I'm very, very self-conscious about my German because my daughter keeps on correcting me. But yeah, it's much better than I had when I first started.
No, I've only just moved to the Netherlands and my Dutch is still very minimalistic. So I completely understand when you move to a country and you feel like you're a ghost almost walking around thinking, I have no idea what anything says. So I have no idea what I'm buying or what they're saying to me. But that's
that was how it started with me as well. But now, like, I understand German much better than before, of course. But I'm on an intermediate level when it comes to speaking it, and far from perfect.
Oh yeah, someone said something the other day, and I've started to click on to certain words. So I was like, "Oh, you just said this," and I was like, "Oh, you got it." So you have to watch out now because I can understand some things. But that's a lot to go through, from relocation, through the job changes, through trying to learn a different language and everything else in between from moving industry-wise. Is there anyone in your life that was a main influence for the amount of drive that you have to get you to where you are today? Or what was your core driver?
That's a very good question. And oftentimes I think about my grandmother. She is the toughest cookie out there. And she's still alive, by the way. She's 93.
Oh, wow.
When I think about my grandma and how much like she was the biggest feminist, she is the biggest feminist I know. Starting in a very traditional society, wanting to work, getting education, pushing boundaries. So I would always think, what would Teta, grandma, do? And would that make her proud? Knowing like the society in the Middle East was completely different and how she fought for her rights. So I think my biggest driver from a personal point of view is grandma. And on the other flip side, when I think about my daughter, I'm thinking, would I be able to put that perspective in her life that she can achieve anything that she wants to do, or possibly my sons with their future partners, or even for themselves to support their partners going forward? Because
like a role model to them as well, with what you would have seen from your grandma.
I really, really try. I mean, I'm actually learning sometimes from my daughter. My daughter she doesn't really care about society norms. She challenges every thought. So she's not the typical girly girl. She's a kickboxer. She's leading in chess and mathematics. And when you ask her, I once asked her, so when you grow up, do you want to take over the world? She was like, no, mom, that's mean. I want to save the world. And I was like, okay, that is nice.
How old is she?
She just turned 11. Actually, today's her birthday. Wow. Yeah.
She's got her head screwed on, that's for sure.
So I think, like, looking backwards, it's my grandma. Looking forwards, it's basically my kids, and specifically my daughter, to make her achieve everything that she wants to have, and know that the only boundaries are those on our heads.
Yeah, no, of course. And obviously from that, and that's really interesting of how you see it from beforehand, but also how you futuristically look at it. Okay, for my daughter, who's going to be her role model, and how can I illustrate what I've been able to implement? Which, from your perspective, you seem mainly drawn to the digital version of financial services.
Yeah.
What kind of navigated you that way? What was the pull factor?
Because I saw a lot of inefficiencies in the traditional world. Like, it can't be that people are still using Excel sheets and not being able to automate things. It's really scary that if you misplace that Excel sheet or delete it, everything is gone. And of course, we're talking about digital resilience, and of course, we're talking about backup plans. But once you go into the legacy systems that a lot of the incumbent companies have, it's shocking that it's just not going to work anymore. Or the fact that certain institutions in Germany still require fax. So that was like, no, we really need to go forward. The only way is digitization, not necessarily blockchain, but digitization in a whole.
Yeah.
And if we do not take advantage of it, by the time that I want to go for my next career step, I'll be irrelevant. And I need to think about how can I ensure that I'm always learning, I'm going to be relevant until I retire, but also, for better or worse, make the industry a bit better than when I joined it.
And that's where you see it as well, from the processes that alternate when you go into a more digitalized manner. It takes a certain mindset because it is having more of a belief in data-led decisions rather than let me look you in the eye, let me shake your hand, let me get 3 yeses across this piece of paper before we make any decision on the business or anyone in it, really. So it's having that sort of agile mindset, I would say, but also way of working, because they want to chop and change it pretty much daily. And decisions are left on kind of 3 sets of data, be it tactical, be it strategic, or be it operational, of what can make a day-to-day business better and how do we move it forward, even from a regulatory stand or from legal from a perspective, where it could and used to be really document heavy, where people just had to look through loads of document, make decisions, write it back and stuff. Now it's all email, it's all video calls, or it's looking at the decisions online and actually picking one. So with Mika coming in, how would you say that would be applied to a business, and what challenges would you find that having?
So let's hope that Mika will be voted on in April before it's going to be delayed for the gazillionth time. So I'm like, please, really need that.
I'm ready for it now.
So when Mika comes in, I believe it will add the regulatory certainty and clarity that we really need from a European perspective. In terms of digitization or automation, we will be forced to do that because we're going to have to apply DAURA, the Digital Operation Resilience Act. And the very recent publication of the Data Act shows that we have to apply specific measures on smart contracts, be it a killer switch, but also enable us to finally have that European digital wallet that would help us in case of identification of individuals. Question mark, how are we going to be identifying institutions? Because retail is perfect, but how are we going to be using the same wallets to identify institutions, or in case of high frequency trading, the actual computer behind it, so to say, or the quantum computing part, which is currently still open. And I feel like, yes, Mika is a wonderful, great step, but it leaves a lot of questions unanswered because it came on the back of the Diem Libra kind of debate and stopping anything that has to do with a private coin. But we still have a lot of questions about DeFi, about DAOs, about what do you mean when you say that certain NTFs will be in scope, but the true non-fungible tokens will be out of scope. So these are the kind of questions that we will still live to see once the regulation enters into force, and maybe will be detailed in the RTSs and the ITSs to follow, all 13 of them.
You've counted them down in one.
I was like, gotta check on that, okay.
Little tick box as you go. I feel like it's an industry that's going to always have hundreds of question marks because everyone's just so unsure about it, and with the technology behind it, it can pretty much apply to anything. How would you say BaFin are working with, because it's really interesting from each different country how the regulator works with digital asset companies, but how would you say BaFin are working with or working against digital assets in Germany?
I would say that BaFin took a very, very smart approach. So at the very beginning, they immediately included crypto Berta, the crypto values within the scope of AML. So they covered the first block that everybody was scared about, crypto and money laundering. So they immediately put cryptocurrencies as a financial instrument within the Banking Act, but also ensured that crypto asset service providers will fall under obliged entities of AML. And that gave the first leap of faith that people can start engaging with it. Then BaFin, alongside the Ministry of Finance, worked to adapt the technology in terms of dematerialization of securities and finally getting rid of that paper deed with the E-Securities Act, starting with bonds and units of funds, and eventually going to shares. Then we see that BaFin had also one of the pioneers when it came to putting a regulation for crypto custody licenses. So we currently have like 4 or 5 crypto custodians that are operating under the German Crypto Custody Act. So in a nutshell, I would say that BaFin took a selective, smart, and timely approach towards adopting the good of blockchain and crypto, but also was very, very strict about offshore operations, about how we will tackle some of the AML risks, dealing with mixers, dealing with privacy coins. So, and also the tax treatment that was pretty favorable in Germany, that if you're holding your cryptos for 1 year, you don't have to pay taxes. Of course, if you have gains on your crypto transactions, then you have to pay taxes. But they're trying their real best to address all of these concerns, and they're super approachable. So you'll just contact BaFin. They have a specific section on their website, and they're usually very timely in their responses.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that they just incorporate into it, and one of the biggest headaches at the moment is AML. Obviously, you started with AML from your very beginning of your career. How would you say technology and blockchain has advanced that particular space?
I mean, when we look at how some analytics tools will show you the entire picture, that was not there when I started my career in AML in 2014. It was like you would still have to go to certain registers. You have your typical Refinitiv world check, and it's a very manual process. But when you look into the analytics tools, and I'm not being so selective, but the famous chain analysis, elliptic, etc., you have everything at the tip of your mouse, and you'll be able to see the different transactions, if it's tainted or not. You can automate certain notifications. However, there's
got to be a but here.
What I personally would really like to see from a European perspective is incorporating already the addresses, the tainted addresses that we're not supposed to be touching. We have it already in OFAC in the US, but in a European perspective, it will be good to get a similar list that we get for entities and individuals, but also addresses, because that will make the whole automation process, the whole monitoring process much more timely.
Yes.
So, yeah.
It makes everything, as you say, one click away, because you can the accessibility of it is amazing. But with the future of blockchain or the technology we have today, how do you see that applying to your particular role and also making it more easier moving forwards? What would you say the advances would be future wise?
I think from a compliance point of view, there will be a lot of RegTech related services coming, but we need to find a way. We need to find a way to work around the outsourcing aspect, because material outsourcing is yet another bottleneck that you need to satisfy from a regulatory perspective. And the burden of compliance always ends up on you, even if you're outsourcing it through a tool. So I believe that there will be a lot of automation in terms of course, AML, KYC onboarding, sanction monitoring, but also market surveillance. And once Mika kicks in, you know that you have to have best execution prices coming on. How are you going to be monitoring these? The aspect that I'm currently struggling with is with regards to the prudential treatment of crypto assets, and how do you make sure that you're giving them the right weight? I'm hoping that some smart quant out there will come up with a great solution, because it's really difficult.
It is. And as you say, we see so many cryptocurrency digital asset businesses wanting to have the conversation around how do we do outsourcing management for risk, which is mainly including your KYC, your AML, your trading monitoring, your surveillance, and how do you actually monitor that internally when they come and say, okay, well, how is it monitored when it leaves? How are you regulating it when it actually leaves the business, and what are they doing with it? And what is their setup in terms of compliance to be compliant against those people's information? So there's so much end-to-end facilitation. Everyone wants to know. I think even we want to know it. We're all just trying to figure it out as we go along, which I think is the key point within digital assets, is you just work it out as you go. It's not necessarily an industry where it's kind of paved in front of you and everything's clear, we all know what we're doing and we're on the same page, because it doesn't feel that way from either
Absolutely.
side. But with kind of you at the moment and what you've done and what you're doing and what you're looking to do moving forward, what would you say excites you most about this industry? And what would you say has been the most challenging point for you in this industry?
What excites me the most, and it's also a challenge, is how quickly things change. So you'll be working under an assumption and the next day it's gone.
Yeah.
Like our crypto securities in the US are not. One day it's a commodity, the other is a security, the other is an exchange value of exchange. So it changes a lot, which makes it beautiful, but also makes it challenging to keep track, specifically from a regulatory compliance point of view. What I love about it is honestly the community. Somehow the community around crypto and Web3 is far more inclusive, engaging, kind. So that's what I love about it. The challenge is we still have a lot of unknowns, and as you said, we're going to have to figure it out as we go. But currently, with everything that's happening, we are having a detox effect. So all the bad players are going out. We're still going to see more players failing and disappearing. Sorry for them, but good for us.
Yeah. Sorry, bad for you, but
and we're starting to see who's in the game for quick wins, but not really to develop the whole infrastructure around it. They're already jumping onto the next shiny thing, AI. So okay, now we know who's really here for the long term. So yeah, I think what's beautiful about it is that we still don't know, but it's not going away.
No, that's one thing for sure, is it's not going anywhere. And it's really, it is what you just said. It's so inclusive. I think the perfect illustration is when we both was at the Binance side of the amount of people that were there, but just also the open-mindedness of everybody to hear it from everyone's aspect and actually take on board what they thought. Everyone really gets along, and even if you are strangers just meeting up, it's, oh, I'm going for dinner, do you want to come? And then you're just sat there having dinner, or you're all having drinks afterwards, but you all have one common denominator, which is the industry. But everyone likes to learn from each other, and everyone does just get along and have a really inclusive approach to it, which is really nice. So obviously that's what excites you, but also what challenges you the most. Where would you say, when you've done hiring, you've kind of struggled the most in terms of diversity? And do you think it's a struggle?
Yeah, like
big question.
That is a very, very timely question, going on to what we spoke about, the diversity and inclusion of the industry. But when it comes to, honestly, women and minorities applying for these roles, they're so difficult to find, because they could be investors, they could be curious about the technology, but when it comes to actually stepping into the game and working within the industry, they're so rare. And I spoke to some of my female acquaintance and people from different backgrounds. They said, like, it's too risky, and as women we tend to make sure that we tick each and every box in a job description. So if it says you have to have, it's really like we hold ourselves to a very strict measure. And I was like, okay, experiment, but you don't have to be a developer. But there are so many different aspects that we need you within Web3 or within crypto. You could be a community manager, marketing, legal. But for them, it's like, no, it's too risky. We're not sure about the reputational risk. And if so, they will tend to go to the more established incumbents, which I also understand, because they have more sense of a job security. And I guess the constant firings and layoffs that we've seen over the past 2 years is not a good look. No, it's not a good look. But I've forgotten the statistics of it now, so forgive me. I'll have to go and have a look. But we saw something, and it was around what you just mentioned of women applying for roles and men applying for roles. Of women will make sure they can tick every single box to apply for it, whereas men will look at whether they can tick kind of 40-50% of the boxes and apply for it, but illustrate like a mindset shift of how they can fix the other 50%.
So it is looking at it from, okay, how can we be more risk averse? How can we have a little bit more appetite in risk when applying for roles, when moving into different industries? And what can we do as people who have a core interest in it to influence more females to get into that space?
I believe conversations like these really, really help, showing that we exist. We're not aliens.
We are here. We don't have three heads.
And I guess like education. And I think I've mentioned this 100 times, but the Frankfurt School has this wonderful program. It's self-learning, but it's for free, and it's called Web3 Talents. All you have to do is just fill in a tiny application, and you will be part of another community that will cover the very basics of blockchain, NFTs, Bitcoin, and you'll have someone coming in from the industry and explaining things to you. And I guess the thing that scares a lot of people is that they think that they have to know the nitty-gritty of how to code a smart contract and what are the different consensus mechanisms. It's great, but you don't really need that. You don't ask yourself how the internet works, or when you go and drive your car, you'll not be thinking about the engine. So, and I think this is where it's coming. Like, they think that they have to look into every single perspective within blockchain, crypto, how do wallets work, and I don't know what, but just get out there, test it, and you would see it's not as scary as you think it is.
As you say, just take it for a test drive, which is what most people do. I mean, let's face it, and I've said this before, you never know crypto until you've got into crypto. I would like to meet someone who can say, I'm an expert and I know everything, because I will call their bluff, because that's not going to be true. Because
absolutely.
It changes so
and
much.
when they say that, run.
Yeah, they are a psychopath. Run away. Because no one is going to know all of that, because physically nobody can, because it changes so much day to day. You hear something new that comes out. But it's just, I think, if you have an interest in the subject, if you explore it a little bit further, the industry itself will help you actually get into it and help you find your feet in it, because it's not an industry where this is my knowledge, bring them in, I'm not sharing. They can fail. It's, okay, well, no, you know this, I know this, let's collaborate, let's see what I can help you, let's see where you can help me, let's swap and share skill sets, and let's try and help you succeed. And that's where it kind of changes the game a little bit, because of how each other interacts with people in that specific sphere as well.
Yes, I see it the same way too.
So if you was, and kind of just looking to wrap it up a little bit here, to say any last points that have been integral to your career growth that you remember being, this was a point where it really changed for me and this is something I really hold on to, or something you would say to influence people to get into it, what would they be?
I think looking back, I should have taken a bit more risks. I should have been a bit more vocal, because I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but usually those who are the loudest are usually those who do not know as much as they claim to be. And I always thought like I could not really speak up because I did not know enough. But when I see the people who are speaking out, I'll be looking at it like, my God, you have real good ego. So you know much more than you think.
Yeah.
Don't be scared to take a risk. And the worst thing is, if it doesn't work out, you can always find an alternative. Ask questions, surround yourself with people who would make you feel better. And you should not compare to someone in terms of achievement or timelines. Take your time and have more faith in yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point. Just have more faith in yourself. You're going to fail. You're going to think you are outspoken in a room, but just put your voice forwards. It's not where no question's a stupid question. Everyone's going to want to answer it because they like and are interested in the particular subject and look to kind of support you in that transition as well. So no, that was really great. So look, it was amazing having you as part of this podcast. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I find it so interesting understanding where people's drivers come from, who they come from, how you transitioned when you moved country. and how you continue to transition throughout your career. And hopefully this will inspire some other females to join the industry, as well as move up to leadership positions in the future. So as I say, thank you for joining. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Yeah.